So this is Form B, and this question's got a trick to it, which is that more than one answer was correct. So when I look at the answers, I notice that they've factored, and I'm looking right at this one first because it's pretty easy in my head to do 4 times x squared is 4x squared, 4 times 3x is 12x, and 4 times 4 is 16. So I know that's one of my answers. The other answers are kind of like, well, do I have to multiply stuff out in order to tell? Well, yeah. If you could factor this into in your head, you know that the two numbers that multiply to get -4 but add to get -3 are -4 and 1, then you would know that that was the other answer. But I have taught you how to multiply, and I saw a lot of students actually go ahead and multiply x plus 1 times x minus 4, and we get an x squared, we get a 1x, and we get a -4x, and we get a -4. And when we combine like terms on the diagonal, we do see that -3x. And so that's how you know that that is the correct answer. How come the other answers aren't correct? Well, if I multiply 4 times x squared here, I do get my 4x squared. But if I do the distribution that is indicated by those parentheses, 4 times 12 is not 12. 4 times 12 is 48. And 4 times 16, I don't know, it's a big number, but it is not just 16. So that's why this is wrong. Looking at these, I recognize it as a difference of squares. And if you do remember difference of squares, then you know that we square the first thing. So this is 2x times 2x, which is going to be 4x squared. And this is 4 times 4, which is 16. So my final answer is 4x squared minus 16. They're missing that 12x. That's why that's not correct. Okay? So when you do a retake of this particular question, you may need to actually multiply every single thing out in order to get the correct answers. There is definitely going to be more than one, though. I'll give you that hint right now. For the next two problems, I'm taking these off of the test. I am changing them into an actual taking the square root problem. Okay, the reason why is because this one, 7% of all of the students who took this test got this question correct. It was a trick question. You don't know how to complete the square, so I'm saying that is not the right way to do that one. It's not factorable, and you can't take the square root unless you complete the square, which I haven't taught you how to do. So I felt like this was kind of a difficult question, which I'm calling it extra credit if you did get it correct. Very few of you did get it correct. So I'm taking it off the test. So you will no longer be able to get 10 points when you retake this. You will only be able to get 9. Okay, and one of those points obviously is extra credit. This one, a lot of kids did get the right answer. It was called taking the square root, but I'm not going to put this question on the test again. Instead, I'm going to take it and change it into, let's actually find the answer to this question. Ready? X minus 8 quantity squared equals 12, and I want an answer to what the solution is. The solution is take the square root of both sides, and I get x minus 8 equals the positive and negative square root of 12, and the square root of 12 is factorable. You could put it into my calculator, okay, if you want to. I'm going to add 8, I'm going to add 8, and I say this is x equals 8 plus or minus. If you plug this into the calculator, that square root of 12 will turn into 2 times the square root of 3, and those are my two answers, okay? Those are my two answers. So it will not be a which is the most efficient. It will just be please solve, okay? So now, how about number 4? Well, I've mentioned just about every day of instruction how important these minus signs are, and many of you still left them off. The quadratic formula says that I can solve for my variable, which in this case is g. Negative boy couldn't decide whether or not to go to the radical party. The boy was square, so he missed out on 4 awesome chicks. The whole thing was over at 2 a.m. Here is my video explaining that if b is negative, you should have the negative of a negative inside of those parentheses. Let me zoom in on that. The negative of a negative inside of those parentheses. If you didn't get this one wrong, it's probably that you left off the extra negative. In here, Some students are still forgetting to put parentheses around that negative. If you are forgetting that, why don't you just leave the negative off? Because you know that when you square a number, you should always get a positive. Okay? A was 8 and C was also, hey, right there, there was your last time that you might have forgotten to put a negative sign down. Put all of that into the calculator and you would get B as the correct answer. This one, I'm going to say 4n squared minus 6 equals 54. I'm going to add 6 to both sides, and I have 4n squared equals 60. I'm going to divide by 4, and n equals 15. You square it, you take the square root of it, and you get n equals positive and negative square root of 15, which is this answer. Flippy flippy to the other side. This gets set equal to 0. This gets set equal to 0. Shh, please, hush. Adding 5 to both sides, I get 2n equals 5. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Add 4, n equals 4. That's my answer. To finish this up, I'm going to say that number 7, you could have done any one of these problems. It doesn't matter to me which one. I wanted you to pick the one that seemed easiest to you. Honestly, this one is the one that seems easiest to me. I'm going to minus 20 from both sides to get this into standard form. And standard form looks like this: x squared minus 1x minus 20, and that equals 0. So I recognize that, and I believe that I could factor it because it says it's a factoring problem. I actually asked you, please, can you factor? So when I look at this, I'm thinking of two numbers. When I multiply them, I get negative 20, but when I add them, I get negative 1. Those two numbers are popping into my head as 5 and 4. And I believe that the 5 needs to be negative, because if I gave you 5 x's and then you give me 4 back x, give me back 4 x's, that's how you still owe me an x. So I'm going to say that this is x minus 5 times x plus 4. And if I'm using the zero product property to solve, I have x minus 5 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. I'm going to add 5 and add 5. I get x equals 5. I'm going to minus 4. I'm going to minus 4. I get x equals negative 4. And those are my two solutions. This one's probably the easiest, but I thought some kids might like this one too. I'm going to minus 12x from both sides. I'm going to minus 12x from both sides. I have x squared minus 12x plus 11. That equals 0. I'm going to put it into my boxes, x squared minus 12x plus 11. And there's really only two options when you're multiplying to get 11. It must be 11 and 1. And I think both of them are negative, because that's how I'll get a negative 12x. So this is x minus 11, and this is x minus 1 as my two factors. X minus 11 equals 0, so x equals 11. And x minus 1 equals 0, so x equals 1. Those are my two answers to this problem. Last one. I don't know why you would pick this one. It looked like the hardest one to me, but I threw it up there because sometimes kids do like that one. Sorry about that. And so I'm going to add 8x to both sides. I'm going to add 15 to both sides. I've got x squared plus 8x plus 15. And when I do the boxes on that, x squared plus 8x plus 15. Well, you know what? Turns out this one's the easiest to factor of all, because it's going to be a positive 3x and a positive 5x. So I have x plus 5 times x plus 3, and when I set each of those equal to 0 and solve, x plus 3 equals 0, I will find out that x equals negative 3 and x plus 5 equals 0, and so x equals negative 5. Those are my two answers for that one. Last question here. I wanted you to know that Susie made a mistake because she forgot to add 25 to both sides. That is not what the question will ask when you take the retest, okay? I could ask you about any one of these steps where she may or may not have made a mistake. But you could say on step 2, for this problem, she forgot to add 25 to both sides. For the next test, you need to look in different spots where she might have made that mistake.